So one of the things that we want to do with these coaching conversations is allow you to listen in to the kind of conversations that Brian and I have and all of the away coaches have, so that you can get some insight and at times even coach yourself, which can be very, very helpful. And so I can't think of a better topic than what we're going to be talking about today when we talk about life hacking. And so, Brian, it's really a concept or a term that you introduced me to. So when you talk about life hacking, what exactly is life hacking? And give me an illustration of how you use that in your own life and leadership.
Yeah, life hacking can be involved, also called biohacking or growth hacking. It's essentially talking about what are the habits that I can practice daily so that when I have to show up and really be a pro that day, that I can bring it. So, I know you like baseball. So if I'm going to be a pinch hitter for the Atlanta Braves and it's the ninth inning and we absolutely need a hit and the coach calls me off the bench and says, get up there and get us a base hit, and I haven't played the whole game, what does it take for a batter to go up there and be able to get a hit? It's not like they're going to call me out of the crowd. I have no prayer. I'm not even going to see the ball. It's going to be in the catcher's mitt. But that person behind the scenes has had an entire lifetime of practicing. So when they stand up and hit that home run in the ninth inning, that wasn't luck at all. That was skill. And they had practice the habits of being a great baseball player so they could bring it. So like in my own life, I'm an introvert. If you take Myers-Briggs, I'm all in on an introvert, which means I have to be really conscious and intentional when I get in front of people. And in fact, usually when I speak, people think I'm an extrovert. It's because I've sort of primed myself. And so one of the things that I do when I'm going into a meeting, which again, kind of a pressure piece for an introvert, especially if I have to lead a meeting, or if I'm speaking, is I look at a door and it reminds me, I just kind of pinch myself on the finger and that fires off in my head 3 words. And those 3 words are present, inspiring, and helpful. And that's signals to my brain that I got to go into the state. So when I walk into the room, I'm going to be the ambassador of abundance that my team needs, a new audience needs to hear from me, or a client needs. So it brings me up to my best. So that's what I mean by a hack. It's just a little thing I push on my finger when I see a door that signals those 3 words. And that would just be one example. And that's something that any of our persons that are watching can do. Think about what are the 3 words that you want to show up with in certain situations. Imagine that situation. And then when you're seeing yourself do it, just kind of push on your finger and that anchors it. And then, use a visual cue or go to the door of the meeting and then fire off that anchor and it puts you into that state. And so you choose how you're going to show up. That would just be one example.
Yeah. When you mention that, it brings to my mind things that I never really considered to be quote unquote life hacks, but they were sort of patterns that a coach had probably instilled in me. For example, I do a lot of presentations and a lot of speaking, and I'm very disciplined in how I actually get dressed. And so as I'm getting dressed, I use that as a trigger to remind myself to ask myself a series of questions. And that is what goal are you really helping them to achieve today? And that pondering that allows me to walk into a given meeting and get focused. So I'm curious, what are some things that you have encouraged or coached others to cultivate to help them hack their life and to figure out what are the things that they need to do so that they can execute at the moment that is so critical?
Yeah, well, I think some key things this goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks when they had this Delphic oracle where people would go to this temple and right on top of it, it would say, know yourself. And so the critical piece for any one of us to be at our very best is you have to be able to draw out of your most authentic self. And for most of us, for various reasons, we end up becoming the expectations of other people rather than drawing our strength out of ourselves. And so some hacks behind that. How do you get real self-awareness? I do 2 things every day. And again, I consider these hacks. In the morning, I do these 2 things together, though you could do them separately. I always have a time of solitude. And what that does, and whether you're a religious person or not, as a Christian person, it's called centering prayer. And so I just essentially sit, and I don't pray with words. I just sit there silently And the whole point is whenever you find your mind distracted with thoughts, you just recenter. Like I can use the word love, or since I'm a Christian, I can say the word Jesus, and that just recenters me, and that breaks you out of the thought pattern. And so, and you can do this as a secular practice. It's called mindfulness-based stress management, where you essentially just listen to yourself breathe. And whenever you find yourself in a thought, which by the way will be most of the time, this is not like you stop thinking, but it's just you learn to be aware that you're thinking. And that may sound a little strange, but that's kind of a eureka moment when you're aware that you can observe yourself thinking. And that lets you get some objectivity to your own life. And what's astonishing about this in terms of why it's a hack is different things will come up in your mind. And oftentimes it can be good things or bad things, but by learning to see what's actually on your mind, what's spinning around in your mind, you can then kind of dump the things that aren't serving you so well in your life. And that's where I think the journaling comes in. So usually after I sit in silence, and I set it right on my Fitbit. I do 16 and a half minutes. I'm slowly trying to get a little bit longer, but for now I'm at 16 and a half minutes. So I set my Fitbit, I close my eyes, and I sit in silence. When my Fitbit goes off, I take a few more breaths, and then I come out and I go right to my journal. And what I do, and this is another hack, is I try to see how my body feels. And I'm looking for, is there places where my body's tight? Is my chest tight? Is my stomach upset about something? And I ask myself, why do I feel this way? And I try to write down things that seem to be bothering me. Perhaps I'm worried about a meeting that I have to do. Perhaps, something popped up. I said something that I shouldn't have said to one of my kids or to a client or something, but I write down what's bothering me. And I just spend 5 minutes in my journal trying to write out things that are bothering me. And then what are some proactive actions that I can do to make that right? And what that does is that gets the stuff out of your head. And then now I can show up. So like if something had been bothering me this morning, I dumped it. So when I show up to talk to you and talk to our friends, I can be fully present. So those are two things that are absolutely critical and those are really essentially daily practices that I do.
Yeah, one of the tools that we've recently developed, which will be available to you on our website, is a tool that we're calling our self-leadership scorecard.
Yeah.
And the self-leadership scorecard looks at 6 areas of life, 6 arenas of life. And we try to identify 5 practices for each arena, which are a little bit like life hacks. And the scorecard is designed to produce self-awareness, right? So that you literally can look at this and decide, how frequently am I engaging in these practices to help me be aware of where do I need to find hacks or cultivate hacks to perform at an optimum level. And in any given point in time in life, there's going to be one of those 6 arenas where you really are struggling. I couldn't agree with you more that the beginning point is that self-awareness. And I think that one of the reasons that we often don't tap into these practices or identify the practices that are going to be most effective is primarily because we're running so hard and running so fast that the thought of understanding the dynamics going on physically, intellectually, and emotionally, we just don't have time for that. And so when we do take the time for it, a whole world of insight and possibilities begin to emerge. And when that begins to happen, then I could start to begin to say, all right, what have I not been doing, or what do I need to do so that I can be at my best when the best is required of me? And, to me, we talk about leadership, and we talk about self-leadership. We talk about team leadership. And there is a large part of that is really about being at your best when the best is being required of you. I'm curious, just are there any tips that you would offer, any encouragement or suggestions that you would offer to clients or potential clients to help them begin to implement and put in place things that allow them to be their best when the best is required of them?
Yeah, it's essentially to look at your life and just recognize that the top performers, and this would be in business, in sports, the best parents, they have essentially rituals that they go through. They may not have consciously thought about them, though a lot of top athletes and top executives do have these rituals. And that's kind of the secret sauce that you don't always hear talked about. That's what's behind the curtain for the Wizard of Oz. You don't just show up and be a top performer without a plan behind you. So I would say start early. Like the old joke about meditation or solitude is people say, I don't have time to do that. And the old meditation joke is if you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, you should meditate for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so it's a matter of just carving out time and recognize what these habits are, what these hacks are, is you may say it's going to take me 5 minutes or 10 minutes extra, but what happens over time, these are exponential practices. So the time that I put in today is going to pay me back exponentially. It's those small things done consistently over time yield extraordinary results. And the reality is, if you're not conscious about what your habits are, you'll be exactly the same place 25 years from today as you are now. So it's about becoming conscious about what you're doing. And so if people want to just make something really easy to get started on this, and this will sound so easy that you won't do it, but I can guarantee this is a life changer too. Every morning when you wake up, write down 5 things that you're grateful for. Just simply doing that, because when you're grateful, you can't be angry, you can't be resentful, you can't feel like you don't have anything. And so just starting that practice can frame your entire day and begin to change it. And if you want to doubly bless yourself, do it before you go to bed too. And it even shows that people sleep better if they end with gratitude, because that's what you go to sleep with in your mind. So again, choose your future by choosing the habits, because that puts you consciously in control. And that's where the self-awareness comes from. And I would say even beyond that, food is part of it. Sleep. So there's a physical part, exercise. And we're not trying to burden people. So like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. But take something small, because you already have habits. See what your habits are and say, okay, where would I like to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? How is my life going to be 10x? And think about, okay, what are the small things that I can do that are going to pay off long term?
Yeah. And so one of the things I often tell people is somebody comes up to you and says, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. Which one do you want first? Always choose the bad news first. In this conversation, partially because it's a little unscripted, we've given you the good news. Now I've got to give you the bad news. And the bad news as it relates to life hacks is often the hack flows on the backside of either an organizational crisis or a personal crisis. And oftentimes, life forces us through pain and disappointment and frustration to figure out what is an area that you've been neglecting, what is an area that you haven't been mindful of or cognitive of. And now, because it's not working, it's not functioning, it causes you to sort through some of these things. So I'm giving you the good news. The bad news, which we've kind of already covered, is there are things that you can develop, practices that you can develop that will allow you to hack your way forward, even in the midst of some either personal or organizational crisis. One of the things that I would also highlight, and I think that this is just really important, is self-awareness is really a starting point for all of this. And there are things that we can do by way of reflection and quietness. But we also come to a greater level of self-awareness through feedback. And this is where coaching becomes absolutely indispensable, because there is somebody who is highly vested in your long-term success and accomplishment, looking at your behaviors, looking at your conduct, looking at what's showing up, and identifying and even making some suggestions to get you to reflect and then to identify those hacks. So nobody achieves a 10x level of performance. Nobody gets better at what they're trying to get better at apart from some sort of external feedback mechanism, namely some sort of coaching mechanism that is helping them to do that. Any final thoughts that you would add before we close out this conversation?
Yeah, I think that was right, and that's where, again, coaching comes in, where you can actually help to speak truth into a person's life out of a caring relationship where you can actually see the best. And I know that even in my own life, I've had 3 different coaches, and each one of my coaches that I've used has really pushed me in these directions to take ownership of my life. That's what we're talking about. A coach isn't really going to tell you what to do. A coach helps you to essentially bring out of yourself that really how powerful you already are. And that's what these hacks do. The hacks allow us to bring out the best of what we already are. One of my earlier mentors always had this phrase. He'd say it for himself: if I want to be free, I have to be me. You know, and how we show up in the world is about, you know, finding your authentic self. And these hacks that I use have helped me to bring out my best. And so I can show up and I can be a pro. And again, I think that's the key thing. The hacks allow you to be a pro in those moments that demand it. Because I think the difference between being an amateur in life and being a pro is when the bad days happen. Because that's as everybody knows, we all have really bad days. Everybody's good on a really good day. That's easy. Pros can at least be good on a really bad day. And I think that the life that we're talking about is what we try to help bring the persons that we work with so they can really go pro in all areas of life. And hacks are one of the ways that I found that to be true for my own life.
If you would like to learn more and elevate your game and your self-awareness and your team awareness, we would love to help you on that. Send us an email, send us a message. We'll respond and allow you to see how Awake Consulting and Coaching can help you to perform at a professional level.